We're live.
We're live. We are alive.
Yes. Absolutely.
On what is so far the hottest day of the year. Could historically be the hottest day of the year.
Yes.
We have an incredible heat wave, don't we?
Yes,
moving
we do,
through.
yeah.
Hope all of our listeners are safe. We're starting a little bit late today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We've got Armando Quintero. And it's Quintero, right?
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Okay. And he's the director of California State Parks. And you brought us honey.
Yes.
And you harvested this honey.
Yes, I have a small apiary in my backyard. I have 4 hives and generates about 150 pounds of honey a year out of
150 pounds by weight. How much? What's the liquid volume on that?
It's about 7 gallons.
It's about 7
From
gallons.
4 hives.
From 4 hives, yeah.
Where do you live, Armando?
I live in San Rafael, and I live
right here. Okay.
Yeah, and I live on a ridge that our home faces the north slope of Mount Tam. So every day I wake up with a view of the mountain and of San Francisco Bay, Angel Island.
Okay, the north slope, this side of it.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I tell you, coming up the peak today, Greg, I saw so many animals. I think it was about 8:30 this morning, and it felt to me like everybody was getting busy to like hunker down for the day, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
They're getting their last water and food and then shade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Last night, the bees, I went out to check the hives, and the bees were all hanging in what are called beards. They were hanging out the front of the hive, just staying cool, and all of them had their wings going, because that's the way they
the cooling mechanism.
they moderate the temperature in the hive. So
That's interesting. In the morning and then the very evening, because this is the lavender time where they're blooming. So early morning now, when it's hot like this, you just go out there, you can't even hear anything but the bees. By 10 or 11 o'clock, it's quieted down. It's too hot for them to work, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then, strangely enough, 5 or 6 o'clock at night, they're all out there again.
Yes.
So I guess it's cooling or in the shade.
They're maintaining the temperature of the hives, and so these hot days are tough.
Yeah.
Well, I'm more familiar with non-hive native bees. We got about 1,300 species or so, and most of them live solitary lives underground, and that's how they mediate the temperature. Because I imagine, and I don't know about Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, which is adapted to a Mediterranean climate, so it gets hot in Italy, for example. But I imagine the temperature inside the hive must get so hot with all that kinetic energy.
Yeah, but they keep it. I mean, those girls, they're all daughters of the queen.
All daughters
they
of the queen.
just
Princesses.
work. Pardon me?
Princesses.
Yes.
I don't recall that story in one of your books. The princess.
I just thought of it.
Yeah. One of my queens failed, and that can happen. They can die or something happen, and I purchased a new queen from a beekeeper in the Sierra Nevada. And yesterday morning, I got the most wonderful call from the place that I had ordered it from. And this very cheerful woman said, "Your queen has arrived."
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so you bowed. I said, I'll meet her.
And I said, "And her name?" And she said, "Well, you get to decide that." So I requeened a hive yesterday.
I don't want to get off topic and
sorry.
waste time, but something really interesting. I just read there was a snake that was in some kind of snake, I forget, in England, a indigenous snake from the Amazon that reproduced after 10 years being by itself. It actually reproduced gave live birth. Mm-hmm. And they said that sometimes bees will do that. Is that correct?
Yes,
I was fascinated by that.
The way that works is that female bees that are not queens can only lay eggs that'll turn into drones or males. They only have half the DNA.
Yeah.
But what they can do when they do that is the drones can go out, find a new queen, and bring her back to the hive. But it's only the queen.
But the drone is sterile, correct?
Well, the drone, no, it's a male, so it can fertilize the eggs. In fact, when a queen emerges from her cell in a hive, she has to go on a maiden flight. Yeah. And during that maiden flight, she puts out a pheromone, and she gets pursued by a number of drones. And drones can't sting you. They can't
we used
eat.
to catch them.
Yes, and they can't eat either, so their only function is to reproduce. And the thing about a drone is when they reproduce with a queen midair, they die upon completion of fertilization. They fall out of the air dead.
Kind of like black widow spiders.
Yeah.
Same thing happens.
And it's true for native bees, too.
So. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, so what if they copulate in the hive? Do they live?
No.
So no matter where they do it, they die.
Yes. Well, they lose their reproductive organ when they mate with the queen.
And subsequently, what we would call bleed to death or something.
Yeah, it's fall over.
Wow. So the most aggressive male who wins the queen has the reward he gets is he has offspring which he'll never see.
Is it aggressiveness which is the determining trait?
I think it's just first in line.
I think it's kind of like, isn't it? I've heard that it's like semen, whichever one hits the egg first, kind of.
Yes. Well, and the queens actually have an organ which colloquially is called the sperm purse. Yeah. And so a queen will only mate during that maiden flight, and then she carries enough sperm for 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And laying thousands of eggs.
Yeah.
Thousands of offspring. Because a typical bee, female worker bee, only lives about 3 weeks. So hives are like a continual regeneration.
Really? They only live 3 weeks?
Except in the winter, they will live longer. But it's just a wild... Beehives are very medieval. Yeah. It's been wonderful keeping bees for a little over 10 years now. And
hierarchical.
Hierarchical, yeah. Still not non-human. There's a eusociality is the term that Professor Wilson gave it, E.O. Wilson gave it, that eusociality is defined by the sexual sacrifice of gender roles to serve something like a larger society, right? It's not like what you would see in every single other mammalian society other than humans. For example, the invertebrates have a lot to teach us, don't they?
Yeah. Well, there's a video right now on the web where somebody saw a bee caught in a spider web, and she took the bee, removed it from the spider web, and put it on the porch of a beehive, and worker bees came out and freed her. And you can watch it over. Anyway,
But aren't they also? This is so fascinating.
Yeah.
But aren't they also fighting against the Asian hornet bee?
They're fighting against everybody. There's yellow jackets. There's ants. There's mites, so they're.
They actually attack them if they come near the hive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can smell it. When the bees are in attack mode in a hive, there's a pheromone that they put out that's very strong. And it's the same pheromone that they put out if they feel threatened by us and they sting us. And they'll put out this pheromone, and that's why more bees will come for you. It's like, hey, we got to protect the hive. This monster's here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Asian hornet is a terribly invasive species, and it is ruthlessly.
Are they progressing? Is it getting worse?
Their territory is expanding.
Yeah.
But it's mostly on the Western Pacific, not the Eastern Pacific. I think historically, over the past 20 years, there have been a few instances of hives trying to establish themselves in California, but they've been immediately destroyed. There's a California Department of
course,
Wildlife.
that's frightening. That's the ones we find. That doesn't tell you what else is out. The ones out there that we haven't found.
Oh my goodness! The most insidious. Well, the most insidious might be our very own species.
Well,
but I think that
we'll get self-corrected.
I think that what SOD sudden oak death informed us of was that in fact it's fungal pathogens that might be and have historically been the worst vector of stress towards any given botanical population or ecosystem writ large. I mean, you see the history of the chestnut, you see the history of sudden oak death, which surprisingly has fallen out of the headlines really, and largely because of the drought.
Yes, although this last winter with the long rains, the last 2 winters with the long rains, there's been a prevalence of it coming back. Now, interestingly enough, I have a couple trees that have been infected for 15 years.
Oprah is, right?
Yes. But what happened is because of the drought, the progress of the disease stopped. But it started up in the last couple winters. Now, suddenly, with this heat and this dryness, it stops the sap. Everything just stopped again. So, and the bizarre thing, as you well know, is that the trees that don't die from it right away anyway are the greatest carriers, which are the bay trees.
Yeah, that's right.
So they don't die, but they continue to live to host the pathogen as it jumps to the oaks.
Adaptive resiliencies, vectors of stress and resiliency. It's fascinating how that works across the biodiverse system. But I want to ask you, Armando, what else do you raise any other kind of animals, or you just got bees?
I have chickens and a vegetable garden.
Oh my God, I'm coming over. I've had chickens since I was a kid.
Same.
What kind of chickens? I know. I just ordered 50 for our organic farm, so we'll have
wonderful
black copper Morans that lay the coffee
I have
colored
those.
eggs. Yes, and they got some. No, I'll tell you. Watch out for the feathers. Any chicken that's got feathers on its feet will have a tendency to get mites, leg mites. And they were supposed to be docile, but ours are pretty aggressive.
Mine, I have 6 hens. Right now, I started out with 8, and 4 copper Morans, black copper Morans, and 4 Americanas. So our eggs are turquoise and chocolate brown.
Turquoise. Oh, that's really
and
cool.
They're beautiful. I love giving away these cartons of eggs.
Yes, that's when we have we also have the King of England's favorite kinds of chickens. They lay spotted eggs, very spotted. I can't think of the name right now, but they're spotted as of a large quail egg. And so we have the spotted eggs and all of that. And to give these to the elders in the tribe, then they get these eggs that are fresh and wonderful from
and
these
beautiful.
chickens. Beautiful. I gave, by the way, I'm Joan Baez's chicken man. I gave her all her chickens, and she's got those. And I have pictures of the eggs, her eggs, which I can brag.
That sounds like the title of a story you haven't written yet.
Yes,
Joan Baez's
chicken man. That has other perhaps implications, but she loves her chickens, and she names them, and they're all over the place. But I love chickens. When I was a kid, I had banties, and then
so do we.
I had golden sea brights. There's millefleurs.
Millefleurs are the sweetest creatures,
and they really hatch a lot of babies. They're great brooders. Yeah. But you cross them with a golden sea bright, and you're going to get chickens that look like wild pheasants. They're amazing.
Oh, weird.
Interesting.
Yes, yeah.
But let me ask you this: what kind of land are you sitting on?
It's tiny. It's 80 by 90 feet.
It's 80 by 90 feet.
And our home is like
right?
a 1,500 square foot home.
Oh, okay.
But we're on a ridge that was scraped to put in this development, and so it's a serpentine subsurface.
Oh. And
since I've lived there for 28 years, most of the yard is now natives. But as you know, getting natives to take root is a lot of failure. But now,
in serpentine soil, it sure is.
So I brought in soil, but the thing that's incredible is keeping bees and creating a garden that's made to support bees. The native bee populations in my yard is mind-boggling.
Oh, wonderful.
And
wonderful.
Recently, in an abandoned small nesting box, a hive of bumblebees showed up, and I'd never seen that. Anyway,
a hive of bumblebees. Well, we have a lot of bumblebees here.
They're usually solitary, but this is a hive in a bird nesting box.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well,
the yellow-faced bumblebee?
Yeah.
As I told Obi, when the people that were here before me had dogs, and you get rid of the dogs, and you start planting other plants, and takes about 2 years, the animal and bird population will come back and invade and live here. And it's been happening with the birds and the bees and all of the other animals. So it's been pretty incredible what you can do.
How about cats?
I shoot them. They kill all the quail.
The birds.
The neighbors had them, and I threw rocks and get them out of here, but there's no cats. Also, the wonderful thing, I don't have to shoot them or bother.
Coyotes
and bobcats. And I've got lots of bobcats, lots of coyotes, and weasels will also fight a cat. So I haven't seen weasels, but we also have lots of foxes, and they all have their babies now. They're cute.
Wow.
But it's like National Geographic up here.
It really is. There's a thing going on. Maybe our cameraman can swing around. Maybe he'll find them on his own. But there's a few burrows up here. I think it's the ground squirrels. And there's little patches of hay outside of their little dens that they're building, and outside of the entrance to their little burrows. And
it would be ground squirrels. Most of the squirrels here make nests in the trees,
right?
Because they're
the red squirrels, right?
And it's so funny because they
squirrels
drive me nuts because they dig and do everything and eat all my succulents. But the wonderful thing is, I can tell you when a bobcat's in the area, all the squirrels are up high. None are crawling around.
Oh yeah. Well,
even if I haven't seen the bobcat, I can tell that. Likewise, when the deer are very close to the house, I know a cougar's in the area.
Mm.
So,
you
become part of the whole.
Well, we saw that prince this morning walking around with his velvety antlers.
Yeah,
and he's a friend of yours.
Yes, he comes every morning.
And he was right. He was unafraid of me. Walked 10 feet from me.
He's like a cow.
It was just as Angela, your assistant, was driving out.
Yeah.
And he's like a cow.
No, I mean, I go out there, and then, he waits for me to spray water, and then he licks the water. Mm-hmm. So, they get very gentle and tame.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I love
well,
them.
let's pull up our discussion to talk more about the state right now. Here we are in a crazy heat wave. And I saw an image, you guys, this morning that I want to share with you right now. The Thompson fire up in Orville is beginning to rage at about 4,000 acres.
Is that still out of control?
Yes.
Yeah. It just started yesterday.
They've just evacuated the east side of Lake Orville. There's a few ridges up there. We have a number of employees that were evacuated from their homes. We've closed the lake, the campgrounds, and the city of Orville and portions of it, they're doing evacuations. But I'll have to say, CAL FIRE is putting everything on all these fires as soon as they appear. It's pushing eastward right now.
Well, I saw an image this morning, and I'm going to not do something I don't really do, but I'm going to pass this around. But look, this is from FIRIS, the Fire Integrated Real-Time Intelligence System, and the dam is on fire. And I thought, to me, that's almost like a pale blue dot moment. That's such a picture.
Well, that's like a fire engine being on fire.
Yeah, right. The dam, our tallest dam in the state.
But the thing about it is that's a hydropower dam.
Yeah.
And so all of the power lines and everything that come out of there is what is being protected. And actually, after the event that occurred there in 2014 or 2016 when the dam overtopped, the utilities came in and changed all the power lines to protect them from disaster more than they had been. Yeah. So we'll see how this goes. But
we'll see how this goes.
What's frightening to me is there's so much fuel, and with this heat, the only blessing is, and I hold my breath the whole time, that there's no wind or minimal wind. Because I want you to just look over there at my neighbor who hasn't taken care of the fuel.
Yeah, right.
Just turn around.
No, I can see that.
See
that. And it's tinder.
And the old trees that have fallen over there, the whole mountain's that way, and the cattle that were up here are supposed to take care of this. The grass has been so high, I guess they haven't gotten it down, and I'm petrified.
Yeah, the state looks like that. I mean, for the most part, we're talking about the responsibilities of the private and over your domain, which is the public domain, but we have. But my book comes out in 65 days. It's called
On Fire.
The State of Fire: Why California Burns. It's a little ecological treatise on the why of things. There's a lot of there's a certain ethic at play there that really is sort of Leopoldian in nature, like really sort of thinking like a mountain, but also sort of stemming from my conversations with Greg over the past 2 years, where this sort of indigenous dynamic versus a colonial mindset about what fire was, and can be to the state in very, very much human terms. But I tell you, 65 days from now, anything could happen. I don't know what.
And 65 days after.
It's 65. I know. From national politics all the way down to what's happening in my backyard, it just feels like a sprint right now. And it's such a pleasure to be able to sit here with you gentlemen on such a gorgeous, albeit warm morning, however artificially augmented the temperature and the climate.
It's a moment
might
of
be.
peace. And as I was saying to a friend who Carol, who gets very despondent over the situations that are going on. And I said, in times like this, we can't let these times rob us of these moments because we're still alive. And if you're anticipating, and it's part of the whole colonial mindset to always be worried about what's happening next. The whole Western civilization, its biggest problem that it goes along with its separation from nature is it just can't be here now.
Yeah.
We've got to conquer the hill over there. We've got to fix this. We've got to do that. It's a pathology that just keeps us rolling and disturbed forever. It's endemic in our culture. And there's the total inability to be here now. And with things that are happening, for those of us who care, as the three of us who are sitting here, the challenge is we're the first fish that'll bite that bait of panic, right? And so I have to remind myself, my God, the hummingbird's doing its thing. Greg, shut up and just sit there and keep doing what you're doing best and hang on to those you love. I mean, what else can you do?
I think that different than magical realism, I think magical thinking is what gets us into trouble, which is what I think you're talking about. And the work that I have been doing for a while, just personally, is we really need to be thinking about the world at scale. We can't think about a part of a mountain. We need to think of the whole mountain. And I think
the world is a mountain.
Sure. I mean, I just think we need to look. I mean, when I think about parks, we have a physical boundary, but one of the things that I have been saying is we need to be thinking about what nature's boundaries are in which the parks exist and what's going on beyond this artificial border and how are we working with the neighbors to be
beyond the fences we create.
Yes. In fact, there's a great story which I heard from a indigenous fellow from Eastern Canada, and there was a young man who was in a graduate history program. And in the final, he had the question. The question was, what was the biggest impact that Western expansion had? And he put one word down and got an A, and it was fences.
We think in fences rather than communities. And the indigenous mindset is communities. Community of trees, community of birds, community of squirrels here, community of, there's interconnected communities, each a microcosm of the macrocosm. They're all interconnected. And we can't think that way. We think in squares, boxes, categories, and we map the landscape accordingly.
Okay. You're getting to a place really fast where I wanted this conversation to go. And I should have known that with you two we'd like bypass everything, because here we have a man who spent better part of half a century in service towards this idea of a public lands, right? Did you start your career with the National Park Service? Is that right?
Yes. I mean, recently I gave a talk, and there was a group of scientists, and I looked at all of them. They all looked like they were in high school, but they're all PhDs, which makes me feel old. But I looked at
that happens.
and I looked at them and I said, honestly, you are looking at a 5-year-old who wants to be an artist and wants to engage in the natural world. That's who is still right here in front of you. But here are some of the things that I've been doing. And I think I think it's important to remember those spirits within ourselves. And I thought I wanted to be I was raised in a traditional Mexican family. I was destined to become a priest for the first several years of my life, in my mind. And then I thought, no, I want to be a doctor because I want to have a family. I don't want to be a priest. And then I did volunteer work in that space for a little while, and I thought, I think I want to be a park ranger. And got a job right away at John Muir's home, and started that whole adventure. And it has always been about people, actually, and the dumb things that we do, the things that seem like they're good ideas, and then the reality of what happens with what we do. And so I was a park ranger, and then after 22 years, we have 2 daughters. They were 3 and 5, and I took 10 years off to be a full-time dad.
Wow.
And with that, I got to really listen to my daughters, and when they were little, I said, "You guys are Buddhas. You are teaching me every day. I watch you and listen." And I tell people all the time, listen to your children. Their wisdom is like pure, and it happens again when you're elders, if you're lucky. And anyway, but what I did also is I explored things that I thought I might want to do for income as I got older. And so I did artwork. I taught Spanish, art, and science in elementary schools. I taught Spanish at a couple of preschools too, and just had a lot of fun. And I also led natural history trips around parts of California and Baja, Mexico, and that also was an incredible experience of working with adults and thinking about how do I get in there, you know. And but in that work, I also worked with nonprofit boards, and I was recruited by UC Merced in 2008 to raise money
great
for
campus. That's doing great things.
I
love Munoz, Chancellor Munoz,
Yeah.
the greatest guy on earth.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
He came up here and talked to the
Really?
Latino schools himself, and came up with the money. And there's UC, as you know, is having its money issues. He came up with the money to do bus tours to take those Latino kids to UC Merced.
So that campus was the first UC campus in the Central Valley, and up until that point, which was 2006 when it opened, up until that point, applicants to the UC system from the Central Valley were rare. But with this
They're all poor people and Latinos. That's
right.
Yeah.
And so what happened is when the UC Merced opened up, people from the valley started applying. But the thing about the UC application system is when you apply to one, you can just check boxes and apply to all of them. So suddenly the Central Valley population across the UC system jumped. And the beauty of that is those people are going to be bringing that home, which is exactly where I feel like we really need to be paying attention as the Central Valley. So really quickly, a few years I raised money for the campus, but then I became executive director of the Sierra Nevada Research Institute, which was a interdisciplinary team of researchers and scientists, and that's the world that I think we really have to operate in. And I also ran, because of my fourth grade daughter, I took them on a field trip on Mount Tam to teach them some botany, and the kids all went, "What's this water?" And I said, "This is your drinking water." And it's gorgeous, as you know, as you both know. And a few weeks later, I was at home, and Bella screamed for me in the house, and I found her in the bathroom, and she's standing in front of a toilet like this. She goes, "We are not flushing our toilets with that water," as she pointed at the mountain. And I said, "Sweetie, I'm so sorry." And she goes, "Dad, that's disgusting."
It totally is.
Yeah.
She's totally right.
She was furious.
Wasting that water.
And then just a few years later, a seat opened up on the water board, and I got a call from a
there
couple
it is.
friends.
Okay.
So your daughters are leading you.
Absolutely.
That's what's happening here. Leading you,
Wonderful.
pointing to all the gates through which you go making your career.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
That's
and
pretty
so
wonderful.
and so what happened is Jared Huffman called me and said, "Hey, you should run for the seat." And I thought, and so at dinner I said to my wife and my daughter, I said, "Hey guys, should I run for the seat?" And Bella, this is 2 years later, she pushes away from the table. She goes, "I thought you said you couldn't do anything." So I ran for political office without knowing a thing.
Like your daughter.
Well, that's nothing new. But what your interest
Well, that's
is.
true. No, but you know, I tell people all the time, the most important thing you can bring to anything is what you don't know.
Yes.
You know, your naivete is going to be more informing than what you think you know.
Well, because your interest and passion, even if you don't know something, if you're genuinely interested and want to do something, such as what do we do about that water that we're flushing away, that is 98% of the battle that you can win.
Exactly. And in 2014, at that time it was the biggest drought in history.
Yes.
In the West, and John Laird bumped into me at a reception, and he said, "What the hell are you doing being president of a water board during the worst drought in history?" I said, "It's the best time." I said, "You have everybody's attention, and you can really talk about the reality of what we have to do." And 4 months later, Governor Brown's office called me and appointed me to the California Water Commission, where I ended up getting involved in statewide water. And right after I got on the commission, there was a proposition passed. It was $2.7 billion for new water storage projects. And most people thought that those water storage projects were going to be new dams. And
I remember that. A lot of people are up in arms. Yeah.
yeah, well, I was...
A lot of Indian people are up in arms.
Well, and I was elected chair shortly after, and my only objective was to make sure everybody understood what was going on, but also we need groundwater storage. We don't need dams. You know, that was my focus. And then, so
That's wise.
Yeah, so all that was going in parallel. And part of it was working at the university. I had all these incredible people at 10 campuses that I could call and say, hey, can you tell me how this works? Which is the questions that are the most important.
Yeah.
And then I started at state parks almost 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember when that happened. A footnote here, by the way, Senator Laird was on the Senate Rules Committee, who just confirmed my, my role in the youth region as a regent.
Oh, congratulations!
So, and I went in there and talked to him beforehand, and we talked nothing about, excuse me, anything but the coast. So he's a good guy.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, now
that's the story.
I want to annotate both some things that I heard you just said that I think maybe was lost maybe on our listeners. Like you said something very strange. Your daughter's revelation, I think, sounds potentially strange to most people, that using water using potable water for flushing is somehow perhaps not the best solution. I think the way I interpret that statement is like, by putting our nutrient-rich human excretion into the water cycle, as opposed to putting it into something like the nitrogen cycle, on an ecological perspective, is really sort of unwise thinking, and maybe will be remembered as one of the single dumbest things.
Let's translate that to something basic.
Okay, let's
which we do at the casino.
Yeah.
80% of the water, only the drinking water and showering water and to wash the dishes, is not recharged water.
Oh.
Why can't
Agreed.
everybody else do that?
Yeah.
Why can't towns and cities do that?
Yeah.
There's efforts at it. In fact, there is a water district in the LA Basin called West Basin Water District, and that water district has always been reliant on purchasing water from adjacent water districts.
Yes, and that's what they're,
Yeah, but what the manager at West Basin did 20 some years ago is he convinced his constituents to increase their water bills pretty significantly, and they put in several water recycling plants, and that West Basin Water District clients, everything that they get is recycled water. And it's all comes from treated wastewater from the adjacent communities that they then recycle, and they actually produce uber clean water for technology uses, and water that's also purple pipe water, so water that's used for irrigation as well as drinking water. And it's a success, and it's a
Is it costly? I mean, what are the challenges? I mean, I don't recall us. I think we did an agreement with the city of Rohnert Park about this, but what are some of the challenges about doing this more broadly or more large scale?
Basically, what they use is a desalination plant.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
They're using reverse osmosis. But the trick is, when people talk about desalination, they think about ocean water, which is extremely salty. But when you look at treated wastewater, it's hardly salty. So it's very efficient. And the other thing about the membranes, I don't know, the technology's probably changed since I was looking at this, but the membranes in reverse osmosis work better if the water is heated. And that takes energy. Well, there are now really efficient solar water heaters that you can use that heat water instantly. So there's mechanisms, I think, for removing that energy cost to heat the water, to put it through reverse osmosis. And it is clean. And there, the water district at the south end of the valley actually has a reverse osmosis operation. But they use it for their treated wastewater, and it's actually a really interesting experiment that they're doing down there. Santa Clara Valley Water District actually is doing that. But
it does seem like desal, which is still at about $1,000 an acre foot, something like that, is the price is plummeting. But I think the price for reservoir water is going up. If we can, right now we're discussing Marin water. In your neck of the woods, about 75% comes within the water district, but you get 25% from the Russian River watershed up here, and we're talking about removal of the Potter Valley complex right now to free the headwaters of the Eel, right? And so that will be an interesting negotiation with Lake Mendocino.
Yeah, and
yeah, that's going to be an interesting discussion.
Well,
to
it's
say
happening
the least.
right now.
Yeah.
I mean, PG&E wants out of Potter Valley Complex, and it looks like it's not going to affect the urban sector water availability at this point. But
I think the part of the challenge with all these things, this and milk and other things that we use, is that they're subsidized, and so I really, most people don't know how much water they're getting for $1 when they pay their water bill. And when I've asked that, in fact, one time when I first started with Marin Municipal, we raised the water rates by 3%. And you'd have thought that we were stealing people's children.
Yeah.
And we had a crowded room, people were yelling, and there was one gentleman who was screaming at us from the podium. And and I was new, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I'd done my homework. I thought,
about 10 years ago? Is that what we're talking about?
2008.
Okay, 2008.
Yeah, and so I'd done my homework, and I had 10 things that I thought, well, everybody should know this about water. And I said to this gentleman, I said, I'm sorry, but how much is your water bill?
Yeah.
And it was like, he lived in a very wealthy area of Marin, and he said, oh, it's like $1,500 a month. And I said, do you know how much water you're getting for $1 when you pay that bill? And he didn't. I said, well, you're all here concerned about your water rates. How much do you get for $1? Not only did none of the audience know, none of the board members knew, and none of our staff could answer that question in that moment.
I wouldn't have been able to.
I know. Well,
admittedly.
but
I don't think that's your fault.
Yeah.
No. But you know what it is? At the time, you were getting in Marin County water from Mount Tam, 250 gallons for $1.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of water.
Today it's about 100 gallons.
You would think.
But the thing for me about the pricing of water in particular is we're not taking into account the management of the watersheds, things like controlling fire, keeping the system healthy so that it's purifying the water before it gets into the ground or into reservoirs. And I think that the challenge for all of us in part is going to be, how do we acknowledge the true cost?
Well, let's get political here for a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
What about the dam grapes and the unregulated use of water in this county? I just flew in, when I flew in from the East Coast, to go over all of the Napa Valley, all of Calistoga, the hills, everything are just cut up, dried up, with vineyards and vineyards and vineyards that are using water, so at least here, from the Russian River Basin. And people I know who have wealthy people up in above Healdsburg who have ponds that are being fed by pipes, water that's just sucked right from the river. What about that? And, we're all sitting here worried, and, I love it. The other thing is, people forget that right here in this area, the water table dropped 30 to 40 feet because of the dairies. The dairies use so much water to irrigate, and cows are.
That was the 20th century, right? They're
still there.
I
mean, that's one of the big issues.
It's still affecting the water table like that?
I don't know how. There's less dairy, so I don't know the degree, Obi, that it's still lowering the water table. But there was huge debate about the casino, of course, because of the water. And we agreed what had happened, though, what we found out is the water had been sacrificed from the dairies around there that are now corporate dairies that are milking 500 to 1,000 cows. And they're washing down those barns with water. Water runs all day running that manure. And so you've got that going on in ag, which is a very powerful lobby. And then you've got the grape growers. And I grew up here. Sebastopol used to be apple farms. They didn't take water, right?
And they're dry farming.
They're dry farming. All the apples are gone, and it's all vineyards. And Sebastopol, which was water heavy, is now wells are going dry. People, because of the lobby, I mean, I don't know.
It's really, I think that the difficulty with everything with things you raise and many other things is that it's incredibly abstract, for people to really conceptualize. And it took me a long time to formulate images that I thought would be helpful. For example, when you describe the level in a dam, people can go, oh no, we're running out of water. We don't have the equivalent for groundwater basins.
No, unless you test it every 2 feet.
No, and what happens is, and right now, I mean, and this has probably changed, but a really quick water primer on California is that a typical year, there'd be about the equivalent of 25,000 acre feet of water equivalent in snowpack. Take all the dams in California that we've built, and it's 40,000 acre feet of water. I've got the numbers wrong, but this is more relational. Soil moisture in California should be maybe it's million. I'm sorry, take the thousands to say million. Yeah. And sorry.
I was kind of going, wow, we are in trouble.
Shasta is 3 million acre feet.
No, it's millions.
Yeah.
So it's 40 million acre feet in all of our surface dams. If you take a look at the capacity, the estimated capacity of all the aquifers in California, it's 2 billion acre feet of storage space. Right now, or a few years, 4 years ago was the last time I was really looking at it. It was. 4 years ago, there was 200 million acre feet of available space beneath our feet. Five times the amount of volume in all of our dams.
Depends on where you are, Armando. It gets very complicated.
No, but I'm talking about the whole state.
The whole state. But a lot of that was one-time spend. We already spent so much water that will never recharge because it's been charging since the Pleistocene.
No, you're right. Yeah. You're right. But what I'm saying is this is based on, subsurface measurements that show how much space, because you're right.
There's so much subsidence. And
there's a lot of subsidence, and also the areas where there's clays has collapsed permanently because what happens, clays that are deposited naturally, if you were to...
Yeah, the ground...
Yeah, right. But anyway, clays would look like a bunch of dishes thrown into a sink.
Your point's totally made, though.
Yeah. But once it dries out, it's a pancake like a swimming pool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Some communities like Santa Clara, down there in San Jose is a wonderful example of real municipal policy towards groundwater recharge that is really equitable and really forward thinking and really resilient towards.
But the one point I want to make back to one of the things that Obi said, Armando, is that this groundwater, the time with it, what it takes to recharge. When it's gone, it's gone. And if people have the notion that there's a lot there, the trouble is, there's enough for years and years to come. And I think that people have to be very mindful that there is a limited amount, and when it's gone or as it goes, it doesn't come back. And that's what people really need to understand.
In the groundwater.
Yeah. In the groundwater,
the agricultural lobby, the agricultural GDP, which accounts for about 3%, 4% of the state's total GDP. When you consider... $3.2 trillion GDP in the state, and $700 billion is real estate economy. You're talking about wine. You're talking about development. I mean, that's the real lobby. You're talking about fire and wildland interface. Yeah. It's the real estate lobby. That's where the money is. Not so much even in agriculture.
Development.
Agriculture pulls a lot of weight in terms of water and built-out water usage. I mean, we've got Sites Dam that's going full speed ahead. It's been sort of,
but ag. But I don't. This is kind of getting political and boring. But ag gives way to development because they make money off it. They sell the real estate, so there's not a conflict there at the end, which is horrible for environmentalists.
But I think the point is made also with one of the big thirsty agricultural products is almonds, and we also have wine. Wine is, and these are two very sort of like market-driven economies. We had the pandemic 4 years ago when we saw a huge boom year for wine. Everybody was drinking wine. Everybody was planting grapes. We've got about 4 million acres of grapes across the state now, which is like larger than Death Valley National Park. It's just like an incredible land area dedicated to wine grapes. And I love wine grapes. I love wine.
So, but they don't feed people.
Well, depends. There's a whole agricultural tradition there's a whole. But also almonds are how you export millions and millions of feet to China of water in the form of an almond. True. But so these are market forces, right? So now Gen Z, it turns out, is not drinking wine, and so the wine industry has a real problem. The wine grapes will go away when the business goes away. I was in St. Helena a couple of weeks ago, and I was visiting with some foresters out there with the Meadowwood Resort, and they've built a several 100-acre bioswale with monitored for genetic diversity and planted with trees, redwood trees in the St. Helena Valley there. That's completely irrigated with wastewater from the city, and the owls are there, and the birds are there, and just like these little, like really the science of connectivity over the ecological landscape, really, and how do we reinforce those sinews? Is really a place of hope and good policy and love and joy.
I think there's an opportunity here to talk about something we just did with state parks, and that is the newest state park is Dos Rios, and it is at the confluence of the Tuolumne River and the San Joaquin.
Yay!
It's about in time it'll be about a 2,500 acre property. Right now it's 1,600 acres that has been restored over the last 11 years by River Partners, taken out of ag production.
Who gave that land? Was it the Mapes out there?
No, the Lions.
The Lions.
Bill Lyons.
I'm adopted from that family. They raised me.
Seriously?
One of their relations here. Yes.
Oh.
I went out there when it was Mapes Hereford Ranch.
Yeah. So that area.
That's the full circle. We had had this talk before.
So here's what's happened is Dos Rios, 8 miles from the poor community at the west side of Modesto. It's the confluence of 2 major rivers in California. With the work that's been done by River Partners, we're about to reconnect a 1,600 acre floodplain to the Tuolumne and San Joaquin.
And the bird sanctuary, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Talk about magic.
Let's talk about this for a while.
We walked out there. Obie and Wade Crowfoot and I went for a hike out there. And honestly, in the winter, it feels like you're in a savanna in Africa.
The way all of the valley once was.
Precisely. And so my hope with this as an example, in fact, when we opened the park a few weeks ago, when I spoke to the audience in my opening comments, I said, this is a valley of rivers. This park is just one example of what the San Joaquin and Sacramento Valley.
You're so right.
North to south. And what I said is, we can do this throughout the valley and understand that the fecundity, the fertility of this valley, which is a world-class valley, is because of the wildlife and the water and the soil. And we can bring it back as an example of how we mix this up with those things that we need.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing. Before I forget, you go to Billy Lyons and you tell him his cousin Greg Sarris said hello and we want more land.
Well, honestly, when this governor and secretary said, hey, it's time to take a look at some new parks, I said, we're going into the Central Valley.
Yeah.
And this ended up being, and so I'll give you another example of how this, I hope, continues to evolve.
Again, I'm so excited because
Dos
Dos Rios, because the experience of that, walking out there, again, when you have that, for me, it's the only chance that I have of experiencing indigenous wetlands.
Yeah.
Because with the amount of birds that fly up that were everywhere in the state in the wetlands that are gone, and what a way to restore. It's a magic.
Well, in the middle of this property, there is about a 5 acre section that is being managed by the Miwok. And it's being managed for rushes and traditional plant materials for basketry, because one of the things that many people do not know in California is it's indigenous women in California who have the highest rates of mouth cancer, because most of the harvesting that takes place for the roots that
roadside stuff
are roadside, where there's pesticides and herbicides. So our hope at state parks, I can say this, is to work with indigenous tribes to get
to
full
grow
access,
the sedge and all that,
to have healthy places in traditional landscapes.
Is there a harvest take allowance for indigenous harvest take allowance?
We do it through agreements, and it's tough because, as you know, there's multiple bands and tribes in any geography. So what we're doing right now is working with everyone to provide access to mineral and plant resources without an impediment. And it is when we sign these agreements, I just signed an agreement with the big ranchery up at Clear Lake 2 weeks ago. And
who's the chairman there? Do you remember?
Chairman McDonald. Oh no, No, you know, his name just, I'm embarrassed. But there were a couple of hundred of tribe members at this gathering, and it was profoundly emotional. And everybody was talking about, this is what our ancestors have been talking about in part. But just, it's ceremonial sites and being
Big
able
Grand
to...
Rancheria, where's that?
It's Clear Lake.
It's Clear Lake.
It's northeastern Clear Lake.
Northeastern Clear Lake on Sulphur Point?
No, that's Elam.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, and it was interesting because the chairman spoke right before me, and he talked about how he wished his most recent ancestors could be there to see this, and that this was the place where they were born, and we were talking about all of that, and then it happened. And then when I went up to speak, listening to the chairman and the secretary, I said, you know what today is? It's the solstice.
Oh, wow.
It is a day that I am sure the first people recognized, and it's the day when the days start are at their longest and starts going short. So in a way, it's a new year. And I said, you have a new holiday.
Yeah.
You know, that brings in your, you know, and to me, the agreements that we make that we have been making with tribes are, everyone for me has been a very emotional realization in the moment.
Yeah.
I remember so fondly that day of hiking with you across the Army Corps levees at what was about to become Dos Rios State Park, and we were talking about ecological services. We were also talking about social services that public lands provide, and I love to think of like the systems. The landscape systems that are informed by sort of this trophic cascade of effects from Sacramento to the confluence of the Tuolumne River and the San Joaquin River, where our new state park is, because you have Stockton, which is just downriver from where we're talking about, and one of the pieces of the soundscape that was so clear to me that afternoon was the slapping of beaver tail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like that's a sound that is lost to certainly to the 20th century, and is only just like it's like the strangest drum, right? The slap of just an ornery, gorgeous rodent doing its thing. As Brock Dolman, the hydrologist, says, he's like, beavers do their thing by they set up their dam, and they control the hydrology of the area. And what, if in effect, that does is that it slows the water, it spreads the water, and it sinks the water.
Yes.
Slow it, spread it, sink it.
Yes.
You know,
So
which
it's-
is exactly this ecological engineering that's like, you know, has all of these benefits, these ecological services. That inform also social services. Finally, there's a place to go camping in the valley.
So two metaphors that I love. One of them is, Sunny McPeak was a politician from the East Bay, and she said something one time which I think is beautiful, and that is, there is no silver bullet. You need silver buckshot. You need all the solutions.
I agree with her 700%.
And then there's a wonderful
You're away from
colleague.
the gun metaphor. I mean,
Yeah, right, it is.
Wendell
but-
Berry says
Sometimes you
solve it
just,
for pattern.
sometimes as with certain inappropriate language, it's the only thing there is.
Oh, here I have
Okay,
something that may
okay.
be the other language. And there's a young man named Jose Gonzalez who is very active. He created Latino Outdoors 10
yeah.
years ago. He's now working with East Bay Parks as their, in outreach and doing some great work there.
Great work.
He's a wonderful speaker, and he does a presentation, and I need to credit him with this. He talks about how we use a term operating like a fine-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, maybe we should be operating like a meadow.
Yes. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the...
All roots in.
I was thinking, thinking like the mountain, Leopold, solving
So-
for pattern, Barry. You know,
One
like-
last thing about Dos Rios, just to know where we're headed, I think. Well, two things. One of them is there are other parks in the valley, so we have created now something that we call the River District. And what that means is that there's teams that can work north and south in the valley because they're all dealing with similar issues and knowledge and talent. So I hope to see that really strengthen. But the
are
other
you
is...
working with River Partners on this?
Yeah.
You know, you follow River Partners. That's, I mean, the credit goes to them. And I
It's
think there's
absolutely-
really interesting, like this sort of nonprofit pathway from grassroots sort of community citizen science plus academic science towards like realization in the state capitol, like passing it off. They've been working on this, you say, for decades, and slowly getting the right, recovering the riparian. And like now the pygmy bush rabbits are back, state endangered species, and this is just like sort of field of dreams, right, baby? You just build it.
I think you guys will like this. Next Tuesday, there is a group, and we are meeting at Hetch Hetchy Reservoir.
Oh boy!
And it's SFPUC with Tim Ramirez, who's really wonderful. He's worked with river organizations.
I know, Tim.
River Partners is going to be there. The Interp leadership from Yosemite National Park, I think the Tuolumne River Trust, and state parks.
What are you doing at O'Shaughnessy Dam?
We want to coordinate the story of the entire Tuolumne River.
I have an essay in my book about that.
Yes.
About
in Becoming Story?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which one is that?
It's I forget the title. It was published in the LA Times, and they asked me to imagine.
He's been on book tour for some
This isn't the recent book. It's where is it? After the Fall, and it's about it's all about what Hetch Hetchy was. The Times asked me to do a essay on contact or pre-contact, contact, and then imagine the restoration 200 or 300 years from now of the Hetch Hetchy. So I wrote that, but I want to go back real quickly because there's something really interesting, and I've told Obi this before, but for us, the health of the water was always indicative of the health of the political relations between the tribes. We were all located along bodies of water, which of course are connected. So for instance here, if we were the hill people are here and you didn't take care of the creeks and rivers, it would affect the lagoon. The lagoon people would be mad and wouldn't let you trade. You'd start getting warrior poisoning. Likewise, if they didn't take care of the lagoon, we could poison the water here. So again, like with the beaver, we were a force that had endemic in its culture the maintaining of, in this case, water environments that maintained peace in the world. That's how it worked. The other thing, real quickly.
No, it's right.
So important.
The slapping of the beaver tail. Our women often leached acorns and pounded acorns in the rocks and stuff near that, and they would hear that. They would do the same thing, and it was a song for the thunder.
Oh, for the thunder?
Yes, because the thunder booms. And so this is the booming on earth, the beaver tails and the women pounding the acorns, smashing the acorns.
Interesting. I think that's such an excellent segue to another thing that I wanted to ask Armando about, which is there was this time 4 years ago when you were appointed director of state parks, and you did it right after the CZU fire in Santa Cruz in Big Basin State Park, right? So like that was after that incredible. Do you remember that thunderstorm in mid-August in 2020? I'd never seen anything like that.
That thunderstorm that was statewide reached Marin County at 3 a.m. on August 17th, and I live on a ridge, and I thought a truck had driven into our house. And it was a warm night, so we had our front windows open, and I ran into the living room, and it was like Wizard of Oz. The screens were flying around, there was leaves.
Same here up high,
yeah. So it was just a wall.
I thought it was an earthquake or something, yeah.
And I could see Mount Tam, and I have video and footage of this, dozens and dozens of lightning strikes on Mount Tam, and I could see it coming, and I just thought, what is happening? And then
that was a reckoning of fire policy, though, wasn't it? Also,
when I got sworn in, that was on the 17th. I got sworn in on September 1st, and Wade called me the day before. He said, "Go to the emergency."
Fire was still smoldering at that point, right?
Oh, it was still going actually in parts. Called me on the day before, and he said, "Go down to the emergency ops center, meet the team, go up to the headquarters, tour the headquarters, and then the governor and I are going to show up at 1. And you're going to give us a tour of the burned out headquarters." And so it was heartbreaking. I got there and met the team. And
for those who don't remember, it raged through the old growth and destroyed every building there.
Absolutely, except for one
the first
house.
state park.
First state park, new visitor, new cultural resource center with all the records, everything.
Everything was in there. The whole collection was in there.
So I meet the superintendent, and he goes, "You want to meet some of your team?" I turn the corner, and there's 20 people there in park uniforms, filthy from firefighting. And he leans over and he goes, "Half these people lost everything."
Half these people lost everything. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm. And I started crying.
How could you not?
And no, right. And I just looked at these folks, and I was crushed. And I thought, so my first moment in this job was a complete deconstruction, which, like the not knowing, could not have been better, a more important thing. So we go up to the headquarters really quickly. We walk with the governor, and as we're walking back for a news conference, the governor stops. I was walking with him at the moment. He stops and he looks at all the media and staffers, and he goes, "This is Armando. He's our new state parks director. He was sworn in 5 hours ago." He goes, "What's your vision for the California state park system?" Well, you know what I said? I said,
best question.
First state lands were created in 1864 by Lincoln. It was the Yosemite Valley floor. And I said, and ever since then, we've been accumulating what we have thought of as traditions. Look around. They don't work. And I said, we need to reimagine everything we are doing. We need the best science, and we need genius from every corner where we can find it. Children, communities, elders. We need to figure this out. And then I talked about how, I said a few other quick things, but I also said we were in the height of COVID on September 1st of 2020.
Yeah,
and I said, if we've learned anything, it's that these public lands are essential landscapes. We need more of them, and we need to keep them healthy for mental and physical well-being, spiritual well-being. So that was crazy. And
let me dig down on the ethics just for a moment of what I believe you're saying here with the reimagining of everything, which is a great answer, by the way, to an impossible question.
That's what happens when you're really scared.
No, but you come out with something that is inevitably correct.
Inevitably correct. So what we're saying here, there's a key sort of like justice piece here that like. Ecological policy, especially to something as potentially destructive to this thing called property, as state policy and federal policy is towards something like fire, like I imagine towards flood in like Stockton's case, for example, or even climate change, is an environmental justice issue. And environmental justice issues are linked to accessibility. Like, accessibility is such an interesting word. Like, accessible to my own ability to appreciate the land, which is sort of at the core of these justice issues that I'm trying to bring up. A subtle accessibility to one's own ability to live free of catastrophe perpetuated by governmental policy, as flawed as it might have been. Or as ill-informed.
Yeah. Well, when we did the opening of Dos Rios, one of the people who spoke was a young woman named Diana Avalos, and she works for Jennifer Newsom, and she's her program officer. Diana was raised 8 miles from Dos Rios by a single mom who worked in the canneries. And what Diana did, and I think she was almost the last speaker, audience of a few hundred people, she got up at the podium and she said, "I'm going to read you a love letter to Modesto." And she read this gorgeous letter, which really, literally, in short, said, "Dos Rios is us." It was so beautiful.
That's so key where that is, because there is an issue with the parks that I've had. They tend to, a lot of people of color, urban people, are afraid of them. They don't want to go out there in the middle of nowhere. There's white people out there. And we're not familiar with that.
Right.
But Dos Rios is located right where so many Latinos grew up, and it's next to them, and they can go there comfortably.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that I cheer about this. Right. And as we think about parks, we have to think about, remember, so many of us poor folks will go to parks, but they're urban parks. Urban parks. We'll have picnics galore there, but we won't go hiking. We won't go out. I mean, let's talk real here.
No, I agree.
And we need to get ways and educate to make, again, talk about parks and social justice. It's a perfect way to help so many of us find peace if we can get people out there to find it. And
I couldn't agree more. And I think a fundamental part of that has to do with organizational culture change. And also part of that is language. How do we speak about these places? A tagline that that's disappearing is a tagline that State Parks has had for years, and it's "Live the Park's life." What does that mean to someone who isn't familiar or feel welcome in a park? We started something called State Parks Week 3 years ago, and this year the tagline for that is "This is where you live."
This is where you live.
This is where you live.
And this is
your home.
Exactly. And when I worked at Merced, there's a huge vernal pool complex right next to that campus. Once a year, researchers and scientists go out and spend the weekend there with a bunch of different people. And I invited the dean of the School of Natural History and her fundraiser out there. Her fundraiser was born and raised in Merced, went to Berkeley, came back to raise money for the campus. Her name is Hannah. And the second morning that we were there, I was standing outside my tent talking to the department chair. And Hannah came walking towards us. She's a young woman. She was in her mid-20s at the time. And she pushed her hair away from her face and she was crying. And I said, "Hannah, are you okay?" And the place where we were camping was 25 minutes from downtown Merced. And she looked at me and she said, "I didn't know I lived here."
Yeah.
I didn't know I lived here.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, that's what we need to do with the people of California, is have people of California going to these places and say, "This is where I live."
And by the way, because it's a public park, it's not only where you live, but what you own.
Yeah.
And that's what they must understand.
Okay, I got to jump in here. I got to jump in here because we're talking about very existential questions at this point. Like, we live here. And I think, and I wrote this down this morning, it's like negotiating the separation of the land from the people in terms of ownership, both public and private. Okay, so the land and the people. Yes, we want to re-envision things, but I have to point out that there is a lower economic bottom. Of course there is, towards revisioning everything. And that's called private property. In America, we don't share land unless it is enforced by the public institutions that are democratically brought about. Right. So there is, like, the people are the land are the people, and negotiating that separation is that's where it becomes existential, right? I didn't know that I live here is a very existential question.
Well, but living
an
here,
economic question.
But you can also, I just want to be a little cautious. It's great because you can know you live here, but unless you feel that you have agency where you live, it doesn't mean a whole lot. And so if you're in one of the things that you have as someone who lives here is agency where you might not have it anywhere else in your life.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of a park.
I agree. I didn't go to parks as a kid. It was a thing of imagination. It was books, National Geographic.
Yeah. I went to urban parks.
Yeah, so that's where we had our Easter egg hunts and all that.
Oh, I went looking for them. My whole life. I write these big books, trying to conceive of myself as being from here, knowing that I am always being acutely aware that I'm this construct of identities for a particular racial orientation, a particular economic background, a particular sexual orientation. I'm completely armed to the teeth with all of this privilege. And how do I put down the weapons and finally understand that I live here? This is it's not a destination. I'm not going to get there.
I think a lot about the doorways that people use to access these places. And when I first got on board here, one of the things that is still a big issue for us is access. And the first thing that we proposed, which got funded, was the library pass. I don't know if you were aware of that. We got the legislature to support the distribution of library park passes in every library, every tribal library in the state.
That's brilliant.
So all you needed is a library code. But what we did is we put a QR code on there so that people could tell us, if they wanted, who they were and what their experience was about.
Where can I go get these passes? Any
library.
Any library. There's thousands. There's tens of thousands.
And then
of
you
passes.
could market to them, as we say.
Well, but what was more important is who are these people?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And it turns out that the majority of the users who responded had family incomes in California of less than $60K, had never been to a state park, or maybe one.
Wow.
And didn't realize how inexpensive it was to get into a park because they perceived it as an amusement park entry fee without having been there.
And then what do you do there if there's not rides? That's how people. No, that's how a lot of people think.
So here's what's happening. I love the unintended, I won't say consequences, but the unintended benefits. Librarians across the state are getting inundated with questions about parks. People are checking out books. They're learning about them. And I also tell folks who work in parks, you really have to concentrate and look at who is in the parks, because it is a diversity of people if you're looking. I mean, we all might be wearing the same clothes, which defines a demographic.
So there's this crazy feedback loop that's happening between libraries and parks right now, because this was your innovation?
Yeah. But there was a group that was doing it just in Marin, and I thought, this is a damn good idea.
Okay.
So no, yeah. And
so it makes parks ostensibly free admission if you go to your library first and get a pass. That's what we're saying.
For now, we're trying to figure out a way to keep this going. But more importantly, what it does is it gives us a picture of who are these folks, what do they need, how do we get them access. But they're not the only group.
And whether or not they return.
Well, that's
really key.
Several, and most of the respondents said, we're going to go back 4 or 5 times a year to these parks. The other thing we did is we got the Department of Social Services, which is for people who need state support for living and food stamps and things like that. There was a long time program where they could get a free park pass for their families, but it was like Reagan era bureaucracy, or maybe even older. We made it super easy, and typically there'd been about 1,200 of those that would go out a year. Right now, there are 68,000 families in California who are families of need who have lifetime passes to parks.
That's so wonderful.
And I just think that there's,
Let's supplement that with getting school children out there, because kids who are young and still impressionable, as you as a young person, when you're going out, you get so excited about seeing water, fish in water, that kind of stuff, and that's catching and will be life. So I think working with grammar schools, all doing field trips is also key.
So the third pass we did is called the 4th grade adventure pass. So any 4th grader can go online, register, and and we have 56 parks where there are specific programs geared to the 4th grade curriculum. So the 4th graders, thinking of my daughter, can lead their families as the leader to bring them into parks.
That's great. Make them teachers.
They are.
It's a nutrient. It's a nutrient battery for some emerging psychology, especially adolescent, pre-adolescent, where it's like, where's the rides? You're not a human doing. Like, that's the thing that parks taught me, public lands, as a young man. I was like, no, human being. I don't mean to get completely woo in my rhetoric here, but I think there is something about, in the terribly voracious fight we have popularly for the attention economy, especially of our children who are beset with all manner of
distraction,
mental health issues, which is an environmental justice
issue.
I
agree.
And affording them the space to understand what old bay tree smells like under the sun in July. That's what you do in a park, right? Like that, and that takes a minute, and it takes an hour. At least, and not picking up the phone.
And the types of engagement are critical, because historically, when you brought kids to a beach who were they would have them pick up garbage.
Yeah.
And that's true for many parks. We don't do that. Yeah. And this is going out there. And I mean, one thing that I absolutely love about art is, if you're doing art, and I mean, you both know this, but the world becomes a composition. Driving down the road becomes this visual, wonderful experience. And actually, as I'm sitting here with you, I think, wow, at this moment, we are surrounded by a reflection, basically, of who we are at the moment. And that is a part of the agency that everyone
what is art, or good art, but an attempt to order experience and, reflect experience. And that's kind of what it is I think at its best.
Well, I actually brought a piece of art to show you, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
And we'll post it on the social media afterwards for sure.
Okay, I can give you a digital.
Okay.
I'm a lucid dreamer, and when my oldest daughter was about 5, I had this dream that she was working on something at a little table, and I walked up and I said, "What are you doing?" And she turned her back to me and she said, "I'll show you when I'm done." So my dream was just watching this little girl and her arms and hands moving. And then she said, "Okay," and she turned around and she goes, "Look." And she cupped her hands like this. And I knew I was dreaming. I said, "I need to stare at this because when I wake up, I'm going to paint this." And I was hyper emotional in that moment. And I got up and I immediately sketched on a piece of canvas what I had seen. And then over the next day and a half or so, I painted it. This is what this little kid had painted. Had created.
Oh my goodness. The universe in a flower.
Exactly.
Let me hold it up. I think we got this camera right over here.
William Blake, to see eternity in the palm of your hand and infinity in a grain of sand.
And I thought, and what I've said, and I have that hanging in my house, and for me, that is what children are.
Yeah. They see the everlasting in everything.
And I also love another thing that came recently from watching a documentary, and that is that each of us we each have about 1 billion neurons in our brain. The Milky Way has 2 billion stars.
Yeah.
And that is possibility, power, imagine. It's everything. It blows my mind.
Joni Mitchell said it in the 60s, Woodstock, we are stardust.
Yes. And
this is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
It has 6 petals. I'm reminded of a Douglas iris.
Yep. Yeah, I just drew it as
When you say a lucid dreamer, what do you mean?
It means that I am aware that I can be, not always, but aware of place and time, that I'm at home in my bed.
I'm that way. I'm also aware that I'm dreaming.
Yes, and I can interact.
Not always, but often.
But you talked about seeing your mother.
Your grandmother, yeah.
Yeah, or grandmother. And I interact with my parents who've passed away.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really funny. Sometimes it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And but it's also a lot of teaching. And in fact, I have 6 sisters and a brother. And when any of us dream about our parents, we send a note out saying, "This is what I dreamt." And I sent out a dream recently where my father was insisting that he was not my father. And a couple of my siblings were there. And this is silly, but we convinced him to take a DNA test in the dream. And he did, and then he said,
"See,
I am your father." Yeah. And then we started a story, and he finished it. And we said, "Yep."
That reminds me, again, lucid dreaming or not, of a story Scott Momaday told. And he said he was sitting one night writing, and he kept hearing his grandmother's voice behind him. And he thought, well, this is weird. And he said, "Grandma, is that you?" And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "Are you really there?" And she answered, "If I'm not, neither are you."
That's wonderful.
What I sent this most recent dream to my siblings just a couple days ago, and some of the responses were, "I want to dream about Mom, and I want to dream about Dad." And my response to them was, "You carry them. Mm-hmm. We all carry our parents with us." So
I'd like to segue from dreams towards another thing, but it's still connected because I've been having lots of dreams about bears recently, and here we are 100 years memorializing, commemorating, lamenting really the death of the last California grizzly, and I know that CDFW just updated estimated black bear population numbers, and we're up over 60,000 bears in California.
Huge.
There's vastly more bears than we thought there were in California. There's more black bears in California right now than there have ever been in the geologic history of the physiographic entity that is California.
Is that because the grizzlies dominated?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly
they
correct.
Ate black bears.
Yeah, and it's also attests to the black bears ability to
Adapt.
exploit the niche resources at the urban wildland interface, right? And so it's connected to the fire idea, it's connected to the water idea across the state. And I know your next book is The Last Human Bear, is the working title, correct? The Last Human Bear.
In fact, I heard from Emmerich yesterday.
I think there's this vision swelling inside of me as I really miss the grizzly bear on a personal level. I don't know how to explain it more than that, but I'm feeling an absence.
Well, it's interesting because we had such a interesting relationship with the bears, the grizzly bears, and the most powerful cult. We had cults. We didn't have a centralized religion as we know it. We had individual kinds of cults, and the most powerful and fearsome and respected cult was the women's grizzly bear cult, where they would put on the cape and travel 200 miles at night. And it was international, so that women from a cult would recruit young girls from different tribes, from different areas into their cult. And I remember as a kid, my aunt, I was up at the Kashaya Reservation, and there was a, which is 5 miles up from the sea, she had a sack of, it was abalone and clams at the back door when she got up one morning, and she said, "I've got a friend who's a human bear." Because they would travel and go and find food. You could also have them turn on your enemy. And then there's countless stories in my own family of seeing a grizzly bear out picking blackberries or something, and a grizzly bear came, and one woman had a pistol and was going to shoot it, and the bear went behind the bush and then came back out as her grandmother and said, "Why do you want to kill me?"
I didn't know that you were at Kashaya.
All my relatives, Tom Smith, yeah.
This was a gift to me from Bun Lucas.
He's my cousin. Oh my God! Yes, Bun. I can tell you the whole story about.
I know Bun.
It's a carving of a grizzly bear that's probably about the size of 2 acorns.
Well.
Yeah.
Here's 2 other things that I got from Bun.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I speak the language.
Over there.
Oh yes.
To the camera if you want to. Wonderful little wood carvings.
I don't know that if you can see it.
Yeah.
You can see them, I should say.
Oh, I think it's
the
good.
Kashaya
I think
people.
this is such a, as we wind
Bun
down the
goes
discussion.
back to Annie Jarvis, and Lanny goes back to the Pinolas and the Smiths. So, and I go back to the Smiths.
My father died suddenly in 1986 when I was working with them, and the day after he passed away, Lanny called me and he said, "Come to the Roundhouse tomorrow night."
Yeah.
And the Kashaya community was there, and they held an all-night mourning ceremony for my father. The most spiritual experience of my life that I will never forget.
Yeah, and then Essie Parrish is my grandmother's first cousin, so their mothers were half sisters. But I got most of all my teaching from Mabel McKay, who was a Cache Creek, who Essie brought in to work with her, because Mabel had no people. They were, she was the last of her Cache Creek people from there.
I didn't know your story. I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah, so Mabel taught me everything I know and gave me everything I've got. And then, of course, with Essie, but I've seen many things. I've seen, that's how I know that all that we see isn't all that we see. And so Mabel was incredible. I mean, she was Eastern Pomo and Mabel, or Essie Western, Southwestern, and they were meeting each other in dream 20 years before they met in person.
Is that a Greg Sarris quote? All that I see is not all that I see?
Yeah, that's probably
that reminds me of the Gary Snyder quote that you're always saying. What is that? Not knowing
is best.
Not knowing is best. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, in a
all
way.
All that I see is not all that I see. It's not saying like ignorance is bliss. That's not it at all. It's this state of becoming. It's this state of expanding. It's this state of vulnerability, really, towards greater powers of connection.
That brings up again a quote from Mabel. Whenever I would ask her what a story meant or something that it means, she says, "Don't ask me what it means, the story. Life will teach you about it the way it teaches you about life." The eternal dialogue. And her other great disclaimer about a lot of these magical things is whether you believe it or not, it's true. And I've seen her perform things that I don't want to get sacrilegious with Jesus, but her and Essie, I've seen things that you don't normally see.
You don't normally see.
Yeah, and they're the last. There's nothing like that. Mabel was the last of the. And
Well, where's
Essie,
it
the
going to
sucking
go? Is it
doctors.
going to hide under a rock?
Yeah, and so people would always ask that, and she said, "Spirit ain't going to go nowhere. Ain't going to hide under a rock." And Mabel gave me the best advice I've ever had, and I try to live by it every day. And
I laugh with familiarity because we've been talking for 2 years about,
Yes.
about the
Right.
philosophy of Mabel McKay. Like Greg wrote this book, Weaving the Dream, which was
Okay.
a biography of
Yeah.
the great poem
So,
basket weaver and dreamer.
yeah, so she, not Lanny's group, but a close group there after Essie died. And Lanny went Mormon. They're Mormons, and so they broke away from Essie. But it's all good now. But anyway, I remember not him, but another group was dancing under the oaks there, and they saw Mabel coming, and right in the middle of their singing and dancing, they ran away, stopped singing, and just ran. And Mabel started laughing. I said, "Mabel, what happened?" And she was chuckling, and she said, "They think I'm going to hoodoo them." And I said, "Well, Mabel, you wouldn't do that." And she goes, "No, but I don't know what the Spirit would do." And then my great aunt Susie always used to say, "This Indian business is kind of kooky, ain't it?" So that's
pick your
Essie's
business.
sisters. Yeah.
It's like,
That's wonderful. Well, you've come on a most auspicious day, and you're the most appropriate guest we could have had. After 24 episodes, Greg and I are going to put this show on a monthly hiatus.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing other
Couple
things.
months. Yeah.
But having you here and this bridge that you offer as our guest, and I'm so grateful for that you are such a wise heart, such an excellent administrator and leader, and I'm so looking forward to what happens next. And I turn to my friend, my brother, my teacher, Greg over here. You've been so much to me over these past 2 years.
And thank you for coming up the hill once a month, Obi. Come,
my
literally,
It's
come
my
rain or
honor.
come shine.
yeah, well, I wouldn't call this torture.
Exactly.
But thank you, Obi, and likewise. But we'll continue this. We're just going to take a hiatus. I got so much to do, and I know you got your book, and I'm just getting done with a tour and trying to get another one finished. But I just have to say, Armando, I've always admired your career and what you've been doing. But you really won my heart with something called chicken, bees, and a vegetable garden. So, that's pretty darn remarkable. But as Obi knows, I'd never let people that are politically connected away free. So there is a park right out by the Russian River that it's a state park.
It's named after a tree.
Right. So why don't we work with the tribe to create a co-management agreement?
I don't take it as a challenge.
I love it.
I don't take it as a challenge. I do take that as an opportunity.
That's exactly
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
inferred.
And I think that we are looking across the state at how we best manage lands with tribes. And as you know, up with the Klamath Yurok, we have a JPA with them. And so, and it takes a little time, of course, to work that.
It's the legal stuff. But if there's a will, just like everything else, you don't know what you're doing going into it, but you can do it if there's a will. We have great model. Tole Regional State
familiar.
Park Regional Park is good.
Yeah, willing, and let's just and I always, this is the not knowing moment, right?
Yeah.
And and I also like it when somebody talks about if you think you know something, then you've limited your options.
Yeah.
And so I think when we say, let's try.
Yeah.
Let's see what.
It seems like getting together, even sitting around the table, is like a leg up from just planting the seed. It's almost like the sapling's already here. Just by sitting around, like, we can't help but form community between our 6 eyeballs right now.
Well, you and Carol called me right after I started in this role to talk about this, and I had to sort of figure out what the heck was going on.
I know you were still in the early learning process.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's an incredible team across the board, and I'm really looking to bring and empower people to do their jobs to the best. So.
Well, know that I have most recently have written three concerns that I communicate to the governor. Don't cut money to UC. So far, so good. Don't cut money to Indian Health, which he was going to do. So far, so good. And don't cut money to the parks. So,
all those things have a huge return to the world.
Yeah, and they're interrelated.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you for protecting that. Thank you for protecting that.
Well,
I believe that given the sapling that we have, that we're tending right now in discussions such as this, that this is really a pathway towards a vision, a navigable heading towards something that is like a new industry being brought up from resilient reinforcement, whether it be across the firescape or the waterscape. I think it's going to affect everyone's lives and everyone's industries, from software development to healthcare to real estate management to landscape design. I think we can go down the list, and it's like it's changed so much in the past 100 years, and that change will only be reflected in how much it changes again in the next 100 years.
Well, and Obi, you're absolutely right, and I think that we, all the forces, this conversation is like a spot on the mountain. It's a microcosm of the whole mountain, if you will. And I think that I really feel that more than ever, we need to work together, use our connections for various things. Call me up, ask me to whatever I can do, or who I can call, or whatever. Because I think there's, given the way things are going most recently, there may be some real challenges, especially some of the Supreme Court decisions about regulations and environmental stuff, among other things, are frightening. So, as I say to my friends, we need to love one another, hold hands, and make that a circle of song that creates health everywhere we go. That's all we can do, and we've got to do it. Again, if that hummingbird is walking around smelling those flowers, what business do we have about being depressed and not doing anything?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, but the holding hands is a nice metaphor. I want to battle this out in a democratic context. I there's something about the faithful opposition, which I feel like we've sort of lost in a polarized sort of in a dialectic. We certainly have. Right now we have just spent the last hour and some minutes talking on a policy level that didn't involve that polemic, and I really sort of love this format. This is
that's kind of what I'm talking about, holding hands. But even having said that, as challenging as it is and outrageous it is from a radical kind of left guy here, we got to find ways to talk to other people in our camp.
That's right. And I'm a classical liberal guy. I'm not a left guy.
Yeah. So, we all are mothers or fathers. We all have children. We're all scared. And that's the problem.
And I've heard you call yourself conservative many times too, and I like that.
Yeah. No, well, I'm conservative about a lot of things, but I think that more than ever, we have to talk to one another. Last word on all of this, as a regent, it is so sad. When we were young, all of us were against many of us were against the Vietnam War. We were all together on one thing. This is the first time in history, as in so many places, you have student against student. And it's all about taking sides rather than dialogue. And if we're going to get past this, we can't create a war with the oil companies and Trump and them. In time, they're going to see we're right. But I don't want to see the sacrifices that are going to take place if we have to get to that place.
What an excellent framing. I like that. Yeah.
So, I don't know.
It's important to dig down into this. And it has been important. I think over the past 24 episodes, we've talked for about 40 hours, around this sort of, this inside of this solar system, if you will, always around these issues of what is maximizing well-being for the greatest amount of people inside of this sort of framework that is California on whatever sort of psychic level we imagine it, as being always grounded to what the land is and being from the land and the stories that the land reveals to us. appreciating that is exact, and the threshold. I mean, that's what I imagine the State Parks Department really is like the portal towards these greater understandings, the place.
A small example is that one of the newest state parks in San Diego, which is only 2 acres, is a park that is called Ipe Tipe Kumeyaay Mutnot Hipuk, and it means the land of the first people. And it's a 2-acre park that was designed with 6 bands of the Kumeyaay people.
Kumeyaay, yeah.
And
who go into Mexico.
yes, and parts of Arizona. And the thing about this park is when you get there, the phrase I just said is what you see is the name of the park. And then beneath that it's in Spanish and then in English. And every piece of information in that park is presented the same way.
Oh, thank you.
And so I think that part of what we talked about also is the importance of language and sharing the multiple languages and layers in which we live.
Yeah. So, yeah. And as one thing that I always say is that, as I say to my people, we're revising a lot of the Coast Miwok and some of the southwestern Pomo, or southern Pomo, which is very similar to southwestern. The Kashaya Pomo, is that these trees and rocks listen to that language for many years. Spanish and English is rather new.
No, I know. I mean, believe me, I know.
Spanish and English is rather new. Is rather new. I mean, California has more indigenous languages, more indigenous nations than the rest of the continent has languages and nations. Right?
New world, the whole new world, in fact. And as far as population density, only the Aztec capital, Mexico City, had a more dense population.
It's so abundant. This place is so abundant, and whenever you find a greater number of indigenous languages, you find a corresponding greater biodiversity representation.
And peaceful. That's why, to tie back to the parks, Dos Rios is so important, because once you see what that landscape contains, you can understand how so many people lived here so well for so long.
It's so true. It's so true.
I'm hoping we are planting some big seeds.
For sure. Well, as we wrap up here, we've got a winner. We've got a winner today, our last winner for this incarnation of Place and Purpose. We've got Christine Chrisman from Oakland, California.
Oh, wow.
The placeandpurpose.live website will continue to exist. Again, I can't thank the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria enough for allowing me to help present these stories. I mean, my greatest hope and my greatest fear is that I was not any sort of outsider or anthropologist. I'm not an anthropologist, and although we've done a lot of character analyses of these, southern Pomo and coastal Miwok stories, that I hope to have always come at it with genuine and honest curiosity for patterns that I have my own ideas about, but I do love and feel intimate affection for.
Yeah, Obi, I see that this has been an incredible dialogue. And dialogue is where we always learn the most, and you've been an excellent dialogician.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I don't think you would want somebody that was reflecting everything you were saying, and I certainly wouldn't want to sit here with everybody that says, yes, Greg, I get it totally. Because I don't even get half of what I say, so I need other people.
Well, I can't believe it's been 2 years. It seems like yesterday we were at the top of Sonoma Peak here is where the first village was, where Coyote was chief, and Greg and I took a walk up there when we first met. We have the same publisher, and we were conceiving of just sitting down once a month and talking about this and what kind of space we could allow. We could afford, even to have you here as testament to that investment, to that creative investment, that heart investment. I really thank you for taking the time to come up here.
Man, this is my honor. And actually, there's one person I'd like to mention who has affected the genesis of all of us and many things, and that is Malcolm Margolin.
Oh,
we're going to honor him at Heyday in the fall.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
He's a dear friend.
Yeah.
And
changed the course of my life forever.
For all of us. I mean, his Oloniwe was the first thing I read in junior college.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's the first thing a lot of people read about Bay Area Indian or California Indian people.
Sure, but he's become a friend, and we've done had magical experiences with Malcolm, and I think the world of him.
Yeah.
And thank him for so much that he, again, has been a part of the genesis.
Wonderful point. I think we have to shout out Heyday Books, his baby.
News from Native California was his baby.
Absolutely.
Oh, News from Native California. Go get a subscription.
Yes.
Go to News from Native California, if I could tell the listeners, and become a member of Heyday Books too. You get.
He had the wonderful wisdom and humility and understanding to let California Indians write and run the magazine. Yeah. He wanted to learn. He was curious, just as you were saying earlier, Armando, about the world and about your various jobs that you stepped into or found yourself in. Malcolm wanted to learn, and his curiosity and his responses to things was so clever and so insightful. And God, that guy could quote. He could quote everything from the Talmud to what my aunt said to him 20 years ago. I mean, he just has the sharpest mind. Mm-hmm. And
he still does. He's still running Institute for California Community Art and Nature, and the ICCAN, and you can go there and you can support them too and support his projects and keep up to date with his calendar.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great man, and we all owe him a lot. Remember what I said before, our lives are short. What lives forever is our legacy, what we've done.
That's right.
Or not done.
So Greg, how can people follow you on the social media?
There you can go to Greg Sarris at greatonrancheria.com.
Okay.
I'm there. And
that's your email.
That's my email.
Okay.
That's the best way, I think.
Yeah.
I think I've got a website. I never
You
followed
post
that.
on the Instagram as the Greg Sarris.
Oh, I do?
Yes.
I just gave away a secret. I don't do it. Somebody else is doing it. So,
well, it's usually like your book tour dates, your reading dates.
Yeah.
You're on stage with Joan Baez. You were just last week in Washington, D.C. with Deb Haaland, the Secretary of the Interior, and you were just at bookstores reading your stuff and stuff. So is your book tour winding down?
Yeah, it is. I have a few more things, thank God. I'm glad that I was out there a lot, but that and running the tribe and then the regions, which and the Smithsonian. I was just chairing the board of the Smithsonian, the Museum of the American Indian.
He's just got a few things going on.
And so I'm glad that a lot of things are starting to wind down. And as I said, it's time for Greg to do. I've done. It's time for more nature and love. So that's what I'm going to. As a
rabid fan of your literature, I'm really excited about this next book. Your first soiree back into the world of novelization, right? This will be a novel.
Yeah, I need some work on it, but the editor said it's good, and he said he would champion it, which means they'll take it, I guess.
So this book, The Forgetters, is just a scant, 8 weeks old at this point, out in the world.
April, I think.
That's right, and we've been talking about it on previous episodes of Place and Purpose, so to our listeners, go back and go buy this book. Armando, where can people get the latest on Cal State Parks? I know you're not a social media guy, but
go to the California State Parks website, and the reason that I don't am not active on social media is State Parks is succeeding because of thousands of people. And if you go to our website, there's actually a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for, and you can see all the people that are doing amazing things. Mm-hmm. I really want to elevate the folks who are doing this work day in and day out, the folks who are fighting fires right now and protecting people in parks. That's who matters.
In 110-degree heat.
Yes, they're out there, and I've been on the phone with them this morning. So
there are some true heroes. Those are heroes.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Exactly.
Dedicate this to those who give their lives. That's fantastic.
And if you want to see what we're thinking, you can take a look at our new strategic plan, which is a 5-year vision. And
fantastic.
That's great. Yeah,
and I think I really wanted to make sure that the principles and the values were clear up front, and that employees can read it, and anybody can read it in about 40 minutes at most. And it's very action-oriented.
And you get it how?
It's online at our website. Okay.
There isn't any way to see your art online, is there? Your paintings are so beautiful, and you hoard them.
Yeah, I need to do that. I'm playing.
That's where you go online. Just do that to show the paintings.
Yeah, and there'll be some other name.
They're so good. No. Like we didn't even talk about music. Like, where do you ever play out, or is it you just?
I play with friends.
What kind of music?
I play mandolin and guitar, and there's a band in Petaluma called the Dirty Red Barn, and I'll sit in
think
with
I've
them
heard of
sometimes.
them.
But you'd also know Greg from the Sonoma Land Trust.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've not played with them, but that's the kind of music that I enjoy playing.
Yeah, they once I heard them do "Mary, Don't You Weep" and stuff like that. But I'm kind of prejudiced. Once you've heard Aretha Franklin do it, it's hard to listen to anybody else.
But you were very generous.
Yeah, but no, that's great. Well, I love music, but I can't sing and I don't play any instruments. But we're off the mic, right? I think we're off.
No, I don't think we've said goodbye yet.
Oh, we haven't?
We're still
Okay.
here. We're still talking about music, but we could sign off now.
I don't want to
think
talk
it's pretty
about
good.
my friends in music while everybody's listening.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds
We
good.
have some common friends there.
Oh yeah. I'm savoring the moment of the wind down. I don't want to say goodbye, but
Yes.
so
But
I guess
it's
we'll
not
sign off like
goodbye.
Walter
It's
Cronkite.
a break. It's a break. Everybody, it's a summer break. Obi,
It's a summer break.
come on.
All right, school's out for summer.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And we have our summer school, you and I, things to do. So, yeah.
Well, I wish you and your families and everyone who's listening, thank you so much. Abundance, joy,
Yes.
love, indeed. All right.
Thank you, Obi.
Signing
Thank
off
you.
for now. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Great summer.